Okay, so have you ever been at the grocery store, like totally starving and just dying to get out of there, and then bam, suddenly there's a giant wall of candy bars right as you were about to check out?
Oh, yeah, totally.
That's kind of what we're talking about today. We are doing a deep dive into this idea of choice architecture.
Uh,
It's basically all these subtle little things that are kind of pushing and pulling us to make the decisions that we make every day, and we're going to be using Richard Thaler's book, Nudge, to guide us.
Great book.
Yeah, and we're going to see how even the smallest details can make a huge difference in what we choose. And not just at the grocery store, but even with like big life decisions.
Yeah, Nudge is all about that. It is really easy to think we make decisions just based purely on logic, like we weigh the pros and cons and everything.
Right.
But the book shows us that we aren't always those like perfectly rational beings that economists sometimes call econs.
We're humans.
We're humans, exactly. We have all these emotions and biases and, we take all these mental shortcuts and it affects us way more than we realize.
It's like that story that Thaler tells about a bowl of cashews.
Oh, yeah.
Like he had this dinner party and everybody's just munching on these cashews, even though dinner was like about to be served.
Right.
So he decided to like play a little trick and he removed the bowl.
And what happened?
Well, the guests actually thanked him for taking it away.
Really?
Yeah, they were so happy to not overeat.
That's so funny. It is amazing how we do those things.
Totally. It shows how powerful our automatic system is, that part of our brain that just wants what it wants right now, even when it's probably not the best for us in the long run.
Yeah, and that leads to another really important idea from Nudge. It's called loss aversion.
Ooh, tell me about that one.
So the idea is that it is way more painful to lose something than it is pleasurable to gain something that's worth the same amount.
So like losing $10 would feel way worse than the happiness of finding $10.
Exactly. It's like it stings more to lose it than it feels good to get it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thaler describes this experiment with coffee mugs.
Oh, I think I've heard of this one.
Yeah, so they gave some students these mugs, and some students didn't get a mug. And then they asked the students who had mugs, how much would you sell this mug for?
Okay.
And then the students who didn't have mugs, they asked, how much would you pay for one of these mugs?
Interesting. Okay, so what happened?
The students who owned the mugs, they wanted like almost twice as much money to sell their mug as the other students were willing to pay to get one.
Wow, really?
It's because they were experiencing that loss aversion. Like as soon as they had that mug, it felt like it was really theirs and it was like a real loss to give it up, even though they'd only had it for a few minutes.
That's wild.
Yeah, it is a super interesting thing to think about when you are making decisions, especially like about investing or negotiating.
Okay, so does this mean we're just like puppets being controlled by all these things that we don't even see?
Well, that's not quite like that.
Because that's a little scary.
Yeah, it's not about manipulating people. It's more like Nudge is trying to help us understand how our choices can be influenced by these little cues and then use that knowledge to make better choices for ourselves.
So like gently guiding ourselves in the right direction.
Exactly. One powerful example from the book is organ donation.
Uh-huh.
Countries that have what's called presumed consent, where like everyone's an organ donor unless they specifically say they don't want to be.
Right.
Those countries have way higher donation rates.
Oh, wow. That makes sense.
It just shows the power of defaults, like whatever the default is, the thing that takes the least effort, that usually becomes the choice, even if it's not something we actually thought about.
Yeah, I mean, think about all the default settings on your phone or your computer.
Mm-hmm.
You probably don't even know what all the options are.
I definitely don't.
We all just kind of go with what's already selected for us.
Exactly. And defaults are everywhere. It's not just our devices. You see it in retirement savings plans that automatically sign you up, or those little pre-checked boxes online that try to get you to buy extra stuff.
Oh, yeah. I hate those.
But, those defaults can make a huge difference in our lives and often for the better.
Yeah, I mean, if being in a retirement plan was the default, then a lot more people would probably save for the future.
I bet.
But it's not just about defaults, though, right? Nudge also talks about framing effects.
Oh, yeah. Framing effects are super interesting.
It's like how the way information is presented can completely change what we decide.
Right, even when the actual facts are the same.
Like that classic example about a medical treatment.
Yeah.
Does it sound better if they say it has a 90% survival rate or if they say it has a 10% mortality rate?
Right. Same exact thing, but it feels totally different.
Totally. So how can we use that to help us make bigger decisions?
Well, think about how advertisements use framing to change how we see things or even how political campaigns do it.
Oh.
Just knowing about framing effects can help you see through the hype and make a decision that's based on the real information, not just how they are trying to make you feel about it.
So we've got these powerful nudges all around us, but it's not all bad, right?
No, not at all.
Thaler shows how choice architecture can actually be a really good thing.
Remember Carolyn, the school cafeteria manager from the book?
Oh, yeah. What does she do?
Well, she wanted to help kids make healthier choices, so she just rearranged the food a little bit. She put the fruits at eye level and kind of hid the desserts.
And that worked.
It made a big difference.
Wow, that is so interesting that something so simple could have that much of an impact.
Yeah, and then there is that famous Don't Mess with Texas campaign.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that one.
They used social norms to try and get people to stop littering.
Oh, interesting. How did they do that?
They tapped into that Texan pride, and they kept saying that most Texans don't litter, and it actually worked.
Wow, so they created like a new social norm.
Yeah, and it encouraged everyone to keep their state clean.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So what about like bigger decisions, like financial decisions? Does the book talk about those too?
Definitely. They have a fascinating case study about this retirement savings program that they did in Sweden.
Okay, tell me about it.
Well, the Swedish government decided to offer a default fund.
What's that?
It's this well-diversified investment option with really low fees, and people were automatically enrolled in it unless they chose to do something different.
Oh, so it's like they gave people a good starting point and then they could change it if they wanted to.
Exactly. And it sounds like a good idea, helping people save for retirement.
Right. But I bet it was controversial. Did people feel like the government was telling them what to do?
Well, it definitely raised some big questions, but before we get into all the critiques of nudging, let's look at how the way they designed this program in Sweden actually had a bunch of really interesting outcomes.
Okay, so tell me more about that.
Well, the interesting thing is that the Swedish program didn't just offer this one default fund. They gave people a lot of different options to choose from if they wanted to be more hands-on with their retirement savings.
So it wasn't like everyone was forced into this one specific fund.
Right. It was more like giving them a helpful place to start and then the freedom to explore other options if they wanted to.
Got it. And I'm guessing the way those options were presented probably played a big role in what people chose.
Absolutely. Even little things like the order that the funds were listed in made a difference.
Yeah, I totally get that. And sometimes I just pick the first thing on the list, especially if there are a lot of choices.
I think we've all done that. It's another example of how these tiny details can really influence our choices. And in the Swedish case, the way they designed the program ended up having a huge effect on how people save their money.
So it really shows how powerful choice architecture can be.
Exactly.
But let's go back to those critiques for a minute. Was this program seen as manipulative? Were people worried about being nudged, even if it was supposed to be good for them?
That's a really important question, and Thaler actually talks about these concerns directly in Nudge. One of the most common arguments is that nudging could lead to like a slippery slope, where the government starts doing more and more to control people's choices.
Right. I can see that.
But Thaler says that the whole point of nudging is actually to protect freedom of choice. It's not about taking away people's ability to decide. It's more about guiding them.
So it's about making it easier to make the choice that's good for you in the long run, but not forcing anyone to do it.
Right, and being transparent is super important. Like, any good nudge should be really clear, and obvious people should know that they are being nudged and why.
Like those signs that tell you how many steps it takes to get to the next floor.
Yeah, exactly. They are nudging you to take the stairs, but they aren't hiding it.
That makes me think of those calorie counts on menus.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely a nudge towards making healthier choices, and I think most people are happy to have that information.
Right. Transparency and choice are key for making sure nudging is done ethically. And it's important to remember that nudges aren't always the answer. There are times when you need stronger interventions, especially when it comes to people's safety.
Like with things like smoking or drunk driving.
Exactly. Education and laws are essential in those cases, but for a lot of everyday decisions, nudges can be a really effective way to make positive change.
Thaler also talks about how important education is and what he calls boosting. It's basically like helping people learn the skills they need to make good decisions on their own.
Yeah, like teaching people about finances or how to think critically.
So it's not just about nudging people in the right direction. It's also about giving them the tools to make their own choices.
Exactly.
One of the things that really fascinated me in Nudge was this concept of mental accounting.
Oh, yeah, mental accounting is so interesting.
It's basically how we put money into different categories in our minds, even though it's all technically the same.
Right? Like having different jars for different expenses, even if all the money is coming from the same place.
It's like when I get a bonus at work, I feel like I can spend it on something fun because it feels like extra money,
Exactly.
even though it's all just part of my income.
We make these little mental compartments for money, and it really affects how we spend it.
That's so interesting.
Understanding mental accounting can actually help you make better financial decisions.
Yes.
Well, instead of thinking about that bonus as free money, think about how it could help you reach your savings goals.
Good point.
Another really interesting idea from the book is information cascades.
Like, what are those?
It's basically how trends and behaviors can spread really quickly, even if they are not based on anything real.
So like those viral videos or internet challenges?
Exactly. People see other people doing something and they just jump on board without really thinking about it.
That happens all the time.
Thaler gives this great example of the Seattle windshield pitting epidemic.
What was
Well, people in Seattle started noticing all these tiny pits in their windshields, and all these rumors started flying around about what was causing it.
Oh no, what was it?
That's the thing, there was no epidemic.
Really?
The pits had always been there, people just hadn't noticed them before.
Wow.
But once the rumors started, everyone started looking for the pits, and it caused all this panic.
So it shows how easily we can be influenced by what other people are doing.
Yeah, and by that fear of missing out.
But if information cascades can make people do irrational things, can they also be used for good?
Definitely the Don't Mess with Texas campaign is a perfect example.
Oh yeah, right, because they used social norms to spread their message.
Exactly. By showing everyone that most Texans don't litter, they created a new information cascade that encouraged other people to do the same thing.
So it's not just about the message itself, it's about how it spreads.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are always being influenced by the information around us. So understanding how these information cascades work can help us be smarter about what we believe.
That's really important, especially now when we're just bombarded with information from every direction.
Nudge also talks about how important feedback is.
Like getting information about the results of our choices.
Exactly. Think about those apps that track your spending or how much you exercise there. They're giving you feedback that can help you make changes and reach your goals.
Yeah, those little nudges can be really helpful.
And it's not just about technology. We can give each other feedback, too.
Oh yeah, good point.
Like imagine if you got a text every time you spent too much money on your credit card. It might not be fun, but it could help you develop better habits.
You know, as we've been talking about all these different types of nudges and choice architecture, it's making me realize that they're not just these abstract ideas, they're literally all around us.
They really are shaping our lives in so many ways.
One of the biggest things I've learned from Nudge is that we should be paying more attention to these forces that are influencing us.
Right.
We need to be more aware of the choices we're making instead of just going with the flow.
Thaler gives us all these different tools and techniques to help us design better choice environments for ourselves and for other people.
So whether we are parents or teachers or business owners or even policymakers.
Exactly. He's challenging us to think about how we can use choice architecture to help people make better decisions.
To save more money, eat healthier, make more sustainable choices, and just live happier, healthier lives.
Nudge even goes into specific areas like healthcare and finance. There's this whole chapter about mortgages and credit cards that I found really interesting.
Yeah, I feel like those are areas where nudging could be really helpful because they can be so confusing for most people.
Absolutely. Thaler uses this term, shrouded attributes, to talk about all those hidden fees and costs that can really sneak up on you.
Like when you book a hotel online and you think you're getting a good deal, and then there's all these extra charges when you check out.
Yeah, or those credit card offers that start with a really low interest rate and then it jumps up after a few months.
It's so frustrating to feel like you were being tricked.
Thaler argues that we need clearer and more accessible information. He calls it smart disclosure.
I like that.
Imagine if there was a website or an app where you could compare different mortgages or credit cards and see all the fees and terms laid out in a simple way.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
It would help people make much better decisions and avoid those expensive surprises.
It could save people so much money and stress.
But even with better information, we still have to deal with our own inertia. You know, it's so easy to just go with the default option, even when it's not the best choice for us.
like all those automatic renewals for subscriptions.
Oh, yeah.
Those companies know that most people are busy and might not even notice the charges on their credit card bill.
Right, or those free trials that turn into paid memberships unless you remember to cancel them.
I've definitely fallen for those.
That's why it's so important to pay attention and make conscious choices. Set reminders to cancel those free trials and check your subscriptions regularly to make sure you are actually using them.
A little bit of effort can go a long way.
It's a good reminder that even with the best choice architecture in the world, we still need to take responsibility for our own decisions.
We can't just rely on nudges to do everything for it.
Exactly. Nudge isn't about taking away our responsibility. It's about helping us understand how our choices are influenced and then using that knowledge to make better choices.
So it's about creating environments where the easy choice is also the smart choice.
Exactly.
This has been such a fascinating conversation about nudge.
It really is a great book.
We've learned about loss aversion framing effects,
Right.
defaults, information cascades, and so much more.
And we've seen how these ideas are all around us in everything from school cafeterias to retirement plans, from littering to organ donation.
Reading Nudge has really opened my eyes to all these hidden forces that are shaping our choices every day.
I think the best thing about Nudge is that it gives us the power to become more conscious about the decisions we make.
By understanding how our minds work and how our choices are influenced, we can make choices that are truly the best for us. So next time you're facing a choice, big or small, take a minute to think about the nudges that are influencing you.
That's great advice.
Are they helping you or are they hurting you? Choose wisely. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.
And they didn't just offer that one default fund. They actually gave people a whole bunch of different investment options.
Oh, okay.
So people could pick something else if they wanted to be more hands-on with their retirement savings.
So it wasn't like they were forcing everyone into this one specific fund.
No, not at all. It was more about giving them a good starting point and then letting them have the freedom to explore other choices.
Got it. And I bet the way they presented those choices probably made a big difference in what people picked.
You're exactly right. Even little things like what order they put the funds in on the list had a big impact.
Yeah, that makes sense. I know I've been guilty of just picking the first option on the list sometimes, especially when I'm feeling overwhelmed.
I think we all have, it's another example of how these tiny little details can really nudge us in one direction or another. And in the Swedish case, the way they designed that program ended up having a huge impact on how people save their money.
It's pretty amazing how powerful choice architecture can be.
It really is.
But let's circle back to those critiques for a minute. Was this program seen as like manipulative, or did people feel like it was wrong for the government to be nudging them, even if it was supposed to be for their own good?
That's a really important question, and Thaler talks about those concerns in Nudge. One of the biggest arguments against nudging is that it could lead us down a slippery slope. You know, the government starts with these little nudges, and then it just keeps going further and further until they are controlling all our choices.
Right. I could see how people be worried about that.
But Thaler says that the whole point of nudging is to actually protect our freedom of choice. It's not about taking away our ability to decide for ourselves. It's more about creating an environment where it's easier to make the choice that's good for us in the long run.
So it's like making the healthy choice the easy choice, but not forcing anyone to eat their vegetables.
Exactly. And transparency is really important too. Any nudge that's done well should be clear and upfront. People should be able to see that they are being nudged, and they should understand why.
Like those signs that tell you how many steps it takes to get to the next floor.
Yeah, they're nudging you to take the stairs instead of the elevator, but they're not hiding it.
That reminds me of those calorie counts you see on menus now.
Oh, yeah.
It's definitely a nudge towards making healthier choices, but I think most people appreciate having that information.
Right. Transparency and choice are essential if you want nudging to be ethical. And it's also important to remember that nudging isn't always the right solution. There are definitely times when you need to take stronger actions, especially when it comes to protecting people's safety.
Like in cases of drunk driving or smoking.
Exactly. We need education and laws to address those issues. But for a lot of everyday decisions, nudges can be a really effective way to promote positive change.
Fowler also talks about the importance of education and something he calls boosting. It's basically about helping people develop the skills and knowledge they need to make good decisions for themselves.
Like teaching people about financial literacy or critical thinking skills.
So it's not just about nudging people in the right direction.
Yeah.
It's also about giving them the tools to make their own informed choices.
Exactly.
You know, one of the most interesting concepts I came across in Nudge was this idea of mental accounting.
Oh, yeah. Mental accounting is fascinating.
It's how we tend to categorize money in our minds,
Yeah.
even though it's all coming from the same place.
Right. It's like having separate jars for different spending categories, even though all the money is coming from the same bank account.
It's like when I get a bonus at work, I feel like I can splurge on something special because it feels like extra money,
Exactly.
even though it's all just part of my income.
We create these mental compartments for money, and it really influences our spending habits.
It's so interesting how our minds work.
Understanding mental accounting can actually help you make more rational financial decisions.
How so?
Well, instead of thinking about that bonus as free money, you can think about how it could help you reach your long-term savings goals.
That's a good point.
Another really interesting idea from the book is this concept of information cascades.
Okay, what are those?
It's basically how trends and behaviors can spread really quickly, even if they're not based on solid evidence.
So like those viral videos or online challenges that everyone's doing?
Exactly. People see other people doing something and they just jump on board without really thinking critically about it.
We see that all the time.
Taylor gives this great example of what he calls the Seattle windshield pitting epidemic.
What was that?
Well, people in Seattle started noticing all these tiny little pits in their windshields.
Uh-oh.
And all these rumors started flying around about what was causing it.
Was it something dangerous?
The funny thing is there was no epidemic.
Really?
The pits had always been there. People just hadn't noticed them before. But once the rumors started, everyone started looking for pits, and it created this mass panic.
I can't believe the mayor even wrote to President Eisenhower asking for an investigation.
It just goes to show how easily we can get swept up in social pressure and that fear of missing out.
It's like we're all just following the crowd.
But if information cascades can lead to irrational behavior, can they also be used for good?
That's a good question.
Well, the Don't Mess with Texas campaign is a great example.
Oh, yeah, right. Because they used social norms to spread their message.
Exactly. By highlighting the fact that most Texans don't litter, they created a new information cascade that encouraged others to follow suit.
So it's not just about the message itself, it's also about how it spreads.
Exactly. We are constantly being influenced by the information we're exposed to. So understanding how these information cascades work can help us be more discerning about the information we consume.
That's so important, especially in today's world where we're bombarded with information from all sides.
Nudge also highlights the importance of feedback. Getting clear and timely information about the consequences of our choices.
Like those apps that track our spending or our exercise habits.
Exactly. They're giving you feedback that can help you adjust your behavior and make progress towards your goals.
Those little nudges can really make a difference.
Absolutely. And it's not just about technology. We can all provide each other with feedback that encourages positive change.
Like how?
Well, imagine if you got a text message every time you overspent on your credit card. It might not be fun in the moment, but it could help you develop better spending habits in the long run.
That's a really good point. As we've been talking about all these different types of nudges and choice architecture techniques, it's really hit me that these aren't just abstract concepts.
Right.
They're all around us, shaping our lives in ways we might not even realize.
One of the biggest takeaways from Nudge is that we need to be more aware of these forces that are at play.
We need to become more conscious choosers instead of just reacting to the way choices are presented to us.
Thaler gives us this whole toolbox of techniques that we can use to design better choice environments.
Whether we're parents or teachers or business owners or policymakers.
Exactly. He's challenging us to think about how we can use choice architecture to nudge people towards better outcomes.
To help them save more money, eat healthier, make more sustainable choices, and just live happier, healthier lives.
Nudge even goes into specific areas like healthcare and finance. There's this whole chapter about mortgages and credit cards that I found really interesting.
It feels like mortgages and credit cards are areas where people could really use a nudge. I mean, they could be so complicated.
Oh, yeah, totally. Thaler actually uses this term, shrouded attributes, to describe all those hidden fees and costs that can really catch you by surprise.
Oh, yeah, like when you book a hotel room online and you think you've got a great deal, but then they tack on all those extra charges when you check in.
Exactly. Or those credit card offers that start with a super low interest rate, but then it jumps up after a few months.
Ugh, it's the worst.
Yeah.
It feels like you're getting tricked.
It's definitely not transparent. Thaler argues that we need much clearer information about all of that stuff. He calls it smart disclosure.
Okay, I like that. What would that look like?
Well, imagine if you could go to a website or use an app that lets you easily compare different mortgages or credit cards side by side.
And it would show you all the fees and all the terms and conditions
Yeah.
in a way that's easy to understand.
Exactly. It would make such a big difference.
Yeah, people could make more informed decisions and avoid those nasty surprises.
It would be a huge help.
But even with all the information in the world, we still have to deal with our own inertia.
That's true.
It's so easy to just stick with whatever the default option is, even if it's not really the best choice for us.
Like those automatic renewals for subscriptions.
Oh, yeah.
Those companies know that most people are busy and they might not even realize they're still paying for something they don't use anymore.
Or those free trials that turn into paid memberships unless you go out of your way to cancel them.
Exactly.
Yep.
They're designed to take advantage of our inattention.
I've definitely been caught in those traps before.
So it's really important to be aware of those tactics and make conscious choices.
Like setting reminders to cancel those free trials and checking our subscriptions to make sure we're actually using them.
A little bit of effort can save you a lot of money and hassle in the long run.
It's a good reminder that even with the best choice architecture, we can't just rely on nudges to do all the work for us.
That's so true.
We need to be active participants in making decisions for ourselves.
Exactly. Nudge isn't about taking away our responsibility for our own choices. It's about helping us understand how our choices are influenced and then using that knowledge to make better choices.
It's about creating environments where the easy choice is also the smart choice.
I love that.
It's been so fascinating to dive into Nudge with you today.
I agree. It's such a great book.
We've learned so much about loss aversion and framing effects and defaults and information cascades.
And we've seen how all of those ideas are at work in the real world, and everything from school cafeterias to retirement savings plans, from littering campaigns to organ donation programs.
Reading Nudge has really opened my eyes to all the subtle forces that are shaping the choices we make every day.
Yeah, it's definitely made me more aware.
I think the biggest takeaway for me is that we can all become more conscious about the decisions we make
Right.
by understanding how our minds work and how our choices are influenced. We can make choices that are truly in our best interests.
And that's what it's all about.
This has been an amazing conversation. It's given me a lot to think about.
Me too.
So the next time you're faced with a choice, big or small, take a moment to think about the nudges that are at play. Are they helping you or are they hurting you? Choose wisely. This has been The Deep Dive. Thanks for listening.